God. Hey, y'all. How are y'all doing?
Hi,
Okay.
Sissy.
Hey,
Dr. Blackstock and Gina Brown. Oh my God, I'm so happy to be here. So, we are on our 11th episode of the Well Project's A Girl Like Me Live, which I can't believe episode 11 already, which is a new interactive live streaming series advancing health and wellness discussions and education among women living with and vulnerable to HIV. Every 2 weeks, minus my maternity time, we will be meeting, with different co hosts to chat about key topics in our communities. In today's episode, I will speak with Dr. Oni Blackstock and Gina Brown about COVID-19 vaccination, clinical trials, and why they matter. Just to open up this conversation, I will ask each of you to introduce yourself and your different affiliations, and we'll jump right on in.
Okay, I was going to let Gina start, but I'll go. I'm Oni Blackstock. I'm a primary care HIV physician. I'm also founder and executive director of Health Justice, which is a racial and health equity consulting firm. I was previously assistant commissioner at the New York City Health Department, where I led our city's response to the HIV epidemic, and just want to say how thrilled and excited I am to be here with you, CC, and with Gina. It's really an honor to be invited to be part of this conversation. Thank you.
welcome back, Cece and baby.
Yeah.
I'm so happy you're back. So I'm Gina. I'm a woman living with HIV, 27 years. I'm the chair of the Well Projects CAB and the director of strategic partnerships and community engagement at SAC. I'm a woman living in the South, and I do my work in the South. I'm really happy to be here, and it's so good to see you, Dr. Blackstock.
Yes, I feel so honored to just be like sharing this virtual stage with you all. Like, it makes me feel so good. So, we've had a few conversations regarding COVID-19 and the vaccinations and the hesitance and all of that. It feels good to have a provider. And Gina Brown, I always tell her every time, reading her blog just had me questioning, my decision not to initially get the vaccination. And to read her blog, it was like, okay, well, maybe I can do this, maybe. And then to see, a provider that looks like me, at least similar in skin color, it's like, okay, well, maybe I'll listen. Maybe I'll be more attentive to what you're saying, because I have the habit of dismissing providers sometimes when they're not saying what I want them to say. So, first, I think we should talk. Gina, how was your experience with the vaccine? How are you doing now? Because it's been months out since you've gotten it. You're still
Yes,
here.
I'm doing really well. There's a echo. Is that me? Oh, it's better now.
Sound great
Okay.
over here. Okay.
All right. Thank you. I'm doing really well. As a matter of fact, I'm thinking about the booster. I haven't crossed that, haven't crossed that street yet, but I'm like on the curb and I'm ready to cross. But I didn't have any side effects. I have not had any adverse reactions. I haven't, nothing is sticking to me. Nothing has followed me home. None of those things have happened to me. And I'm wondering why, since all these people say stuff stick to them, I want something to stick to me. I'm just playing, y'all. But for real, I haven't had any problems.
That's great. I got mine maybe about 2 weeks ago, or it might have been last week, and it was just like I was waiting for something to happen. Maybe not stuff to stick to me, but it's like, okay, am I going to blow up? Like, just all of the worst things that you could think of because of so much misinformation that is out there. I guess I was so nervous. So, Dr. Blackstock, as a provider, how do you combat, the misinformation that I'm sure people walk into your visits with?
Yeah, no, that's such a good question, because the misinformation, it's everywhere, especially in social media. And, folks might know that it's like a targeted campaign. Like, there are entities in this country and in other countries that are specifically targeting in particular Black communities for misinformation about COVID-19. So folks should just be aware of that. And so, yeah, so I do actually have a lot of patients and even colleagues that I work with. I work at Harlem Hospital who have shared with me their concerns about the vaccine. I had one patient who is living with HIV. He had 3 family members die from COVID-19, but he was so scared to get the vaccine because he thought it would kill him. So, on one hand, he had these deaths of people he loves, but at the same time, he was so fearful of the vaccine. And so what I find most helpful is just to basically, just hear what people's concerns are. Like, what are you thinking about? What worries you? What might be some of the benefits, some of the good things about getting the vaccine. And so we just kind of like weigh that together. But I try to get my patients to tell me as opposed to putting words in their mouths. And I always ask for permission before I share information, because some people, like, they may not want to hear, sometimes we're like, we think we know what patients want to hear, but they may not be interested. So I always just say, I'm curious. I wonder if you could tell me, if you'd be interested in, learning about the vaccine, or I wonder if you could tell me a little bit what your thoughts are. And then that's how we usually start the conversation. And I have to say, for many of my patients, when we first had the conversation, they were very wary and very hesitant. But I recently had one of my patients who I talked to, I called him, we had a televisit after a few months when I last talked to him, and he said, "Doc, you had me a hot girl summer," because he wanted to have a hot girl summer. So, like, you just have to figure out, like, this was back in May, because I was like, you want to have a hot girl summer, then you want to get that vaccine. So you're just figuring out, like, what matters to people, right? Like, if he wanted to have a fun summer. Okay, so having a fun summer means being able to protect yourself and other people. So that's how we worked it out.
I appreciate that so much. Like, it makes such a difference walking into a provider's office and them understanding, like, because then I don't feel so much like I'm just another patient or a consumer or whatever it is. Kind of went through that in one of my recent appointments where the social worker was trying to convince me to get the shot, and she was like, well, you can talk to Dr. such and such, they have so much information. And it's like, well, I probably wouldn't hear it so well from him than I would someone else. And just expressing to the social worker my experiences in the provider's offices and stuff, and as being a Black girl from the hood, and things that probably resonate with me. And she's like, oh my God, I didn't know so much was going on out there. It's like, whoa, you're a social worker working with this population of people, and you have no clue what is going on in their lives. Like, I've already dismissed you. I don't feel like you care enough about me or people, that might be living similar lifestyles, that I would even want to listen to you. Like, who are you, lady? And I tried to do it very, very respectfully, but, just kind of letting her know that's not the type of care that I'm looking for. Right. But I do have, like, my OBGYN. He's like this Black male doctor who went to Howard, and, like other people. I definitely follow you on Twitter, and Gina just writes and storytells so well. Those influences. So I think this is very important for us to continue seeing, people that look like us. Of course, we want everybody to be vaccinated, but with so much targeting our communities, I feel like it has to be like specific, targeted information.
Totally. And I just wanted to say this a little extra thing. I had just written an op-ed on Monday about, even for vaccinated people, it looks like we're seeing some racial inequities in terms of breakthrough infections. Because, Cece, you were mentioning, like, just how, Black people and other people of color have been disproportionately impacted by COVID-19. But it looks like even after we get vaccinated, even though the vaccines are highly protective, we still, because, occupational segregation, residential segregation has, increased our risk of exposure, in terms of frontline jobs. And because we have more likely to have underlying conditions, we are more likely potentially to get breakthrough infections. So just to say, the messenger matters in terms of, like, getting vaccinated. But even when we're vaccinated, we still have to contend with all these other issues that place us at risk.
So clinical trials. This sounds like such a big term. Someone's cutting grass outside, so sorry, y'all. But it sounds like such, this big, intimidating term, I guess, sometimes. What are clinical trials? Like, how do you become a part of them? What purpose do they serve?
Yes. So clinical trials are, I think, probably one of the key ways of determining like the safety, how safe a medication or intervention like a vaccine is, as well as how effective it is. So clinical trials are like kind of like a rigorous and like systematic way of studying whether it could be a medication like an HIV medication or a vaccine like the COVID vaccine, whether those are effective or not. And they have different stages of clinical trials. So the initial stages are like actually testing the vaccine in like healthy people to make sure it's safe. And then the later stages are in people who may be at risk for whatever the condition is. And you're not looking at just safety, but how effective it is. And just to say that with the COVID-19 vaccine, I was telling my son's, a friend's mother about this, that like the COVID-19 vaccines, I would say those are probably the most studied vaccines that we probably ever had. Like they had been under a microscope in a way that many other vaccines haven't. And so that's another reason, I think that folks should feel comfortable, even though I understand the reason not to feel comfortable, but getting it because they have been so rigorously studied, even in a short period of time. And so clinical trials are really important, and especially having representation of impacted communities. So like having Black people, Latino people, Indigenous people in these trials to make sure that it's not that we think a vaccine would work differently in us, because we know there are not major biological differences between different racial ethnic groups. But we do know, like I was saying before, because of racism, our risk of being exposed to COVID is much higher. And so we also need to figure out, for Black people, given that risk of racism or the risk of exposure, does this vaccine work as well in us as compared to other groups of people?
I'm so glad that you mentioned that. Gina, feel free to jump in whenever you wish. The fact that you said that the COVID vaccine was studied so heavily, like, and you mentioned the short amount of time, I think that is a very important note, because I think I mentioned earlier in the year, I would be more ready to accept a HIV vaccine before I was a COVID vaccine. It just makes sense, HIV has been out for the length of time that it has. And as we know, COVID, like, this is something I just heard of a couple years ago. I'm not sure how long it's been around. So how is it that they were able to study it so quickly, and so heavily?
Yeah, so there are a few reasons why they were able to speed up the time it took to develop and test the medication and make the vaccine. And so there were a few things. So one of them is that you mentioned the HIV vaccine, CC. They were actually able to use a lot of the clinical trial sites from the HIV vaccine network to become COVID vaccine trial networks. So a lot of times when you're trying to like recruit people and do all this stuff, that can be really challenging, and it can slow down or just take longer to do the research. So they were able to take advantage of the existing HIV research trials network. They were also able, and more importantly, to take advantage of a lot of research that had already been done into coronavirus. So folks may know that there was like the first SARS virus that was back in maybe like 10, 15 years ago. I can't remember exactly, in parts of Asia. And then there's also the MERS virus, which is the Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome virus. They're similar to this current virus. And so there had already been 10, 15 years of research in terms of developing vaccines against those viruses. So they're able to use that, the Research Trials Network. And then also what actually ended up really helping is the US government and a number of other governments put in billions of dollars to help with the development of the vaccines for some companies, and also manufacturing. Because the issue is that these vaccine companies, they would not want to start manufacturing a vaccine unless they knew it was effective. But with the government's funding, what they were able to do is as they were testing the vaccine, they actually started building factories and manufacturing the vaccine. So basically, the government funding took the risk out of it for the pharmaceutical companies. So they were able to develop and manufacture a vaccine in record time, in a timeline that they wouldn't otherwise have. So all of those factors played a role. And just to say that I know people who are living with HIV, and many of us who provide care to people living with HIV, feel some kind of way because, we've had this, HIV has been around for at least 40, 50 years, and we don't have an HIV vaccine. And it just shows you what having like political will and funding can do.
Oh, wow. Yes. Thank you. No one has ever explained it. Like I didn't know. I just been living YOLO. Had no clue what was going on. Thank you for that. Gina, you had something to say?
Now, I was just going to say that I agree with everything that Dr. Blackstock said. But just to add a little bit to that, I think a lot of the hesitancy also came from the fact that we had somebody in office, the highest office in the land, who politicized this thing. Because, that's why I started saying, I am not going to take it. I said, he's trying to kill me. like he was trying to kill me, just me. And I was like, I'm not going to do it. But then I was able to put those fears and my concerns on Twitter. And the two Blackstock sisters and Dr. David Melbranch were my guardian angels because they answered my questions. And they didn't make me feel like I was stupid for asking them. Because y'all know I talk about menopause all day. Y'all know that's my favorite subject. And that was my thing. I wanted to know, being in menopause, what would this do to me? And there were people who were going through menopause in the trials, and then I thought about it even more. What would COVID do to your menopause? That's the biggest question. So I had to think about it like that too. But I was one of those ones, CC, who said, this warp speed, I don't trust it. I don't no, I'm not doing it. And I've been living with HIV all these years, and they don't have a vaccine for me. So I was going to be spiteful and not do it because I didn't have the other. And I'm so glad I didn't do that, that I did feel comfortable talking to people who look like me and who I knew would answer my questions in a way that would be affirming, that would be culturally humble, that would be because they knew. And even if they never walked in my shoes, they worked with people who lived my life. So being able to answer those questions was everything for me.
How did you find out that there were people living, like going through menopause, that were in the trials? Like, are we able to look this information up somewhere?
Not look it up, but if you look at the age range of people who were in that trial.
Okay.
Girl, them 50, 60-year-old women were having hot flashes.
Okay. So when I think of clinical trials, like Gina, you always call out this number and letter combination for a trial you were in before. And with me, breastfeeding my child this time, I'm like, whoa, this is a risk, but I've had people go ahead of me. I even want to cry now because I'm so grateful. People that have gone before me that I can kind of look to say, okay, this could work. Gina, for you to be, were you pregnant when you were in the clinical trial? Oh, that's such a vulnerable time. So like, I'm so grateful and thankful for your experience there, because I couldn't imagine I didn't even want to get vaccinated when I was pregnant, to tell you the truth, because you just want to like go into protective mode with this being that isn't even here yet. So for you to be a part of a trial while you're pregnant, thank you, because we need that. We need that so much. Was it scary?
It was. I knew nothing about HIV. I knew nothing about clinical trials. The only thing I knew about clinical trials was Tuskegee, like everybody else. And I still didn't understand that, I didn't really understand that.
Right.
And I had two questions, and I say this often. I wanted to know if my baby would be born with two heads, and they kind of giggled and said no. And then I said, well, he or she be born with a tail hanging out their butt. And they kind of looked at me like I was crazy, and they said no. Those were my questions, because I always thought that with a clinical trial, with any medication you took, people could tell later that the person had been on this. So I didn't want my baby to have any effects from these drugs, but I also didn't want my baby to be born living with HIV. So that was that was the thing that made me decide to do. And the study was 076, and it was to see if a mom took AZT, if it could keep the baby from contracting HIV. And I did it, and I remember going into it thinking, even if this doesn't work for me, it might work for the next woman. And I think I kind of had that same feeling with the vaccine. Like, even if my arm fall off, now they'll know not to give 2 shots, they'll give 1.
Thank you for being so selfless in that. Thank you, because that's what that is. I appreciate it. And the baby did not come out with 2 heads and no tail.
No.
She's gorgeous. I saw me posted her the other day. Gorgeous. Both say actually I saw her question come up a little earlier. She says, is it true that once you get COVID that you build an immunity against it, Dr. Blackstock?
So right, if someone has a natural infection with COVID-19, what typically happens is the body does have an immune response, so that if they're exposed in the future, they have some level of protection. The issue is that response that the body has really varies from person to person. So there's actually a good proportion of people who actually don't really mount much of an antibody response when they have an actual infection. There are others on the other extreme who have a very robust immune response. And so the issue is with vaccination sort of halts that variability. Aside from people who might be immunocompromised, what it does is it ensures that you have a very strong response to the vaccine, so that when you are exposed, or if ever in the future, you can be protected. And so that's why we tell folks, even if you have had the COVID, that's great. You had antibodies. I'm glad that you said it's great that you had it, but you've survived. You're here. You have some protection. But the vaccine can add another layer of protection that's probably going to be much more consistent than what we would see if someone just had a natural infection.
Okay. I'm grateful that has not been my story so far. And I'm going to continue to I'm going to listen, because I can't say out of one side of my mouth that like I don't trust science, and then I take my HIV meds every day and depend on being undetectable, to make other choices.
No, it's hard. Like, I hear people saying things like, if people who don't want the vaccine, but they'll be willing to take treatment if they get sick. But the reality is, like, people, there are different things that motivate all of us. And I think a lot of people find like this. I think it's funny sometimes, like, oh, people you don't know what's in your Coke and you're drinking it. Yeah, but Coke tastes good. Vaccine doesn't. Vaccine hurts, and you don't really. And it's about a potential benefit, right? Like a hypothetical benefit, until the point where you actually are exposed. So I get that people can be very worried and concerned about that. I mean, I have to say, even as a healthcare provider, I was nervous when I got my vaccine. I was really nervous about it. So I totally understand concerns that folks might have.
But were you like one of the first people that got it? Like, I would just assume you were.
Yeah, I got it I got it on New Year's Eve, so December 31st. So I think, healthcare providers and people in long-term care facilities were among the first to get it. Yeah, I was anxious, totally, but I felt fine. I didn't really have it, just had some soreness, and I actually am supposed to be getting my booster coming up. I haven't gotten that yet, but I have to also say, like, I'm like, what is the data, for someone like me to get it? Is there going to be, does the benefit outweigh the risk? And I've been also debating it myself. So just to say, I understand where everyone is coming from. There's so much information being thrown at people, and hard to parse out like what they should do for themselves. So I totally get it.
The question was also posed, how long after you get COVID can you go get a vaccine?
Yeah, I believe initially, when the vaccines were scarce, they were saying for people to wait 90 days. I think people might have heard that because the thought was like, the vaccines are scarce. Let's save them for people who don't have any immunity. If you just had COVID, then you have some protection, at least out a few months. But now there's no need to wait to get the vaccine.
This is all good information. Oh my gosh, like I feel like I should have had this 101 course at the beginning of this year, but I'm learning so much, and hopefully our community is doing the same. Oh my gosh. Okay, so these clinical trials, they seem to be very, very important, but it seems that us as women are often left out of the trials.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and not That's disheartening. Like it's so many of us. Like we matter. We matter. How do you get more women involved? How do you get, because I don't see a reaction on me being the exact same as a man, a younger, man. So I feel like it's very important that we are included. How can we make sure that that is happening?
So, can I start this one?
Mm-hmm.
Kristen will tell you I'm like I'm always screaming about this stuff. But anyway, we can make sure that women are included in research by having research hours outside of traditional 9 to 5. Women have children. If my kid get out of school at 3:30, I'm not coming to your clinic. I'm not coming to that clinical trial at my 4 o'clock appointment. I'm just not coming because I need to be there to get my child off the school bus.
Mm-hmm.
So having non-traditional hours for clinical trials, making sure that clinical trials that the IRB understands that there should not be anything different for a woman in that consent form than was for a man. So
Mm-hmm.
it shouldn't be that a woman has to be on 2 forms of birth control. It shouldn't be anything out there that separates us from being able to be included. And my biggest pet peeve is when I hear researchers say, "Well, women don't show up.
Mm-hmm.
Women they fall out. They don't stay consistently." That's because you make sure that this month my appointment is at 2 o'clock. Next month is at 4:30. The month after that is at a different time. Instead of being consistent with me, instead of asking me as you're creating or designing this research protocol, have a group of women come in and tell you what it is that they can and cannot do.
Mm-hmm.
We don't talk to women, and I say we. I'm not a researcher, y'all. I just play one on TV. But we don't talk to women about their needs as it pertains to research. And if we did, we would have more women willing to be participants. And also researchers should look like us. So if the person who's doing the research doesn't look like me, how are they going to really explain to me how that's impacting my life? But someone who looks like me, I'm gonna listen a little more because I think we have somewhat of the same lived experience. I think that even if they grew up in Buckhead in Atlanta and I grew up in Bankhead, we know some people in the middle who the experience is the same. So doing all those things, I think that we also, and it's the last thing I'll say, we also have to do a better job of explaining research to people.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Don't just go into a community and say, we're doing this research on PrEP and we want you to be involved. Tell me along with that research. How long how long are the appointments? How much blood do I have to give? Give me as much information so that I can make an informed decision. And if you don't give me that, you don't want me in your research.
100%. You hit all the high points, and I think, and just to your point, the issue is the folks who are most impacted need to be part of the work and need to be making decisions. And it just your question made me think about, the dolutegravir situation with the HIV medication, how they had seen that there was this question of it causing potential birth defects in people who were pregnant who were taking the medication. And then they decided, I think the World Health Organization and even the Health and Human Services here in the United States were let's take that off the list of available medications for women, or for people who can get pregnant. And instead of talking to pregnant people and being what makes sense with you, there's a benefit from taking this medication versus this very small risk potentially of birth defects. And what they ended up doing after they heard from advocates and pregnant people and people who have the capacity to become pregnant, who are living with HIV, who can take this medication, they reversed their decision. And they were okay, it can be a decision that the pregnant person makes with their provider. But just speaking to your point, like a lot of times the people making decisions about whether pregnant people are in trials and things, these are not people who have these are mainly like white cisgender men, like, who are making these decisions, versus let it be up to the pregnant person to decide whether they want to be part of a clinical trial or not, whether there are appropriate protections that are taken, whether the benefits outweigh the risks for them.
I love the whole like informed decision piece in it. That I really appreciate that as a patient. That has been like the underlining like mission that I've been fighting for this whole time, outside of the pregnancy and the breastfeeding and all of that. Just allow me to make the choice. Don't just make choices for me. As my provider, I expect I'm going to come into your office and that you're not going to have the decision made already, but we can talk through this together. And I think a lot of times, going to these bigger organizations where they're like capitated to 15 minutes to be with the person, a lot of them do not take their time or unable to take their time to explain. So the fact that we have you for a whole hour, like this plethora of information, then Gina come and hit it, get the snaps, like this is amazing, because this is something that I don't often get. So thank y'all again.
Oh, you're welcome.
So the Well Project, I love this organization. I'll say that every time. We're really big on communities. So we posed a question every week or every episode to our community advisory board members. Is there anything that they want to make sure that we touch on? Yeah, we've done so well, and we've already touched on a lot of it. We had 2 requests for you to talk about the needs and challenges of women in research. Y'all have knocked that one out of the ballpark. So Bridget, she says, I don't think people understand the importance and impact of mutations and why vaccination impacts that. That sounds really scientific for me, so I don't know if you all can answer it.
Okay, Gina, do you want me to take this, or?
Please do.
Okay. Just checking. Okay. So, so mutations are basically sort of just changes in the virus's genetic code. And so as viruses replicate, they actually make mistakes, and they make mistakes in their the genetic code, which can actually either give them advantages or disadvantages. So for instance, like the Delta variant that everyone knows about now that basically took over the US, that variant it mutated from the original, it changed, and it actually, by changing, it was able to become even more infectious or transmissible. And so the whole idea is that if we vaccinate folks, if a lot of people are vaccinated throughout the world, not just in the United States, because we know these viruses they don't know any borders, that if people get vaccinated, it decreases the likelihood of the viruses being able to replicate, right? Because if everyone is protected against the virus doesn't have many people to infect. And when it infects people, that's when it's like replicating, and it passes to another person and it replicates. So by vaccinating everyone, we decrease the likelihood that the virus can continue replicating and making mutations that make it like more powerful. And so that's why we need to get everyone, to the extent possible, or as many people as possible, vaccinated in the world.
Oh.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
So it's like HIV, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
If I'm undetectable, the virus is not mutating, and I can't transmit it to anyone. So the vaccine is, I'm undetectable.
Yeah, but no, you're totally right. Yeah, the medication suppresses the HIV virus in your body, and it prevents it from replicating. And so that's why when people maybe like stop and start their medication, so the virus is like sometimes suppressed, sometimes it's not, that's why people can develop mutations that then make the virus resistant to the medication they're taking. So the same thing, we just want to we want to suppress all replication, because it's the replication, at least for HIV, it causes inflammation in the body. It weakens the immune system. It affects our different organs in our body. But it also increases the likelihood of a mutation whereby the medication won't work anymore.
This is making so much sense, because when I heard, I guess I'm taking bits and pieces of stuff that I hear and not real like credible sources. But I was like, okay, herd immunity. That means that y'all can get it. I can be one of the ones that don't get the vaccine. So as long as y'all get it, we all right. But your explanation just made that make so much sense in my head. And then to even correlate that with being undetectable. I feel good, y'all. I'm vaccinated. My arm hurt a
Yeah.
little bit for only a couple of days, but I feel good. Like
Good.
I'm undetectable. My HIV's taken care of.
Yay.
Battling
Yes.
this other joint. Like I feel good. And I know a little bit why I've made the decisions or whatever. Thank y'all.
Yeah, and
Another
and just as a new mom, and not to put your business all out there, but I mean, I'm also just so amazing that you have a 4-week-old and you're here with us. I'm just like so impressed because I remember at 4 weeks with my little one, I was like, I couldn't even
I'm
put
falling
together. I
asleep.
actually forgot his name. I remember I could not like pronounce his name properly because I was so surprised. Sorry, but sorry. So just to say, like, yeah, it's to the vaccine, right? It also protects your little one too. It protects everyone, and that's the wonderful thing. Like the vaccine, I think we think about it as like an individual and personal decision. And I think that's like a very American way of looking at things. But I think for many other countries and countries that where there's more of a collective sense of like we're in this together, the vaccine is also like it's about not just me, but my community and people around me. And it reminds me of, when HIV medications were first being made, there was this whole thing about whether people in sub-Saharan Africa, whether they could adhere to their treatment, like how would they remember all this stuff. But I remember reading this one study where people in sub-Saharan Africa actually had higher levels of HIV medication adherence than the United States because they saw taking their medication as not just an individual thing, but something they did for their family and for their community. So I think of like the vaccine as something really similar.
Yeah, it would be cool if we thought that way on a larger scale here. But I definitely was like, no, y'all can go and do it. I can be one of the ones that don't. But I'm grateful. Like it does feel like I've done something for the greater good and not just for,
Oh no.
Are we frozen?
Okay, I'm here. I think
Okay.
CC. Okay, I know. I wanted to make sure. I think CC's connection. I think. Oh, okay. CC said we can continue.
Yes.
Okay. She's back. I think you're back, CC. We see
Am
you.
I? Hello?
Yeah, we see you. You're
Yes.
back.
All right.
I couldn't tell if it was my connection or not. Okay.
Okay.
We're all like.
This thing
I
come
was like,
loose.
they're not responding to what I'm saying. But now that I have been vaccinated, I feel like even a lot of my decision making is made with a little less anxiety now. I've been so worried to send my son back into school, so he's still homeschooled right now. But I feel protected now. And apparently, the baby gets some of the antibodies from the breast milk. Is that happening?
Yeah, I actually saw someone even commented a little earlier in the
Heather.
comments, which is really nice. It was like, yeah, baby gets lots of those antibodies because the baby's immune system isn't fully developed, and so they rely on their parents' immune system, as they're getting that breast milk or chest milk to get those antibodies to protect them. So you are doing wonderfulness, lots of goodness for your baby.
Yes. So now, like, and I don't know if I can reorchestrate my life now to where I'm like not operating from such a place of fear and having to like stay at home and stay like of course I'm still wearing my mask. We talked about this before, Gina. I'm still wearing my mask. I'm not walking any. I just felt so much safer in there. But now maybe we can move and try to get back to how we were living before because homeschool is really hard. That
Yeah.
changes everything that I have going on. Just that peace of mind for maybe 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
That's how the rest of the week even goes. So
Yeah, and just to also just say, we're waiting for the vaccines to be authorized for younger children, 5 to 11, and hopefully that should be happening within the next few weeks.
Oh,
And,
wow.
and the data that we have is, that it's very safe and it's effective in children. So I for one, will definitely be taking my little one. He just got his flu shot. He'll be getting his COVID vaccine shot when it becomes available. And I just to say, I understand parents' concerns. And again, these vaccines have been studied like up the wazoo. And so, we know in terms of short-term side effects that we know what those are. And long-term, I know a lot of people have questions about long-term safety. Just from the history of other vaccines, side effects tend to happen within the first like 4 to 6 weeks. It's very uncommon for vaccines to have like side effects months and years later. And so hoping that the COVID-19 vaccines, are similar to previous vaccines that we've had.
That makes me think of those commercials that's like, it comes on and it's like, have you or one of your loved ones ever taken this medicine? So what you're just saying, that most side effects come between 4 to 6 weeks afterwards. How do we get to a space like that then, where this medication isn't, like, now there's a class action suit or something against the makers of something? How do we get there? How do they miss those long-term effects?
Yeah. So for instance, I mean, actually, as you were mentioning that, it just made me think about just most recently the commercials that I see regarding that were related to Truvada.
Mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm.
but that was because the whole so Truvada, as everyone knows, is a medication for people living with HIV. It's very effective, but we also know that there's another medication, Descovy, which has less kidney and bone side effects. And the whole issue with that medication, that issue is that the pharmaceutical company is thought to have actually known about Truvada's bone and kidney side effects, but they wanted to get as much sort of life out of the patent for that medication so they can make as much money from it.
Oh.
So they put the safer in terms of bone and kidney health, on the shelf until the patent could run out for Truvada, and then they introduced it. And so the class action suit is because people are like, you knowingly, knew that it had these side effects in people living with HIV and still marketed when there was a safer, at least in terms of bone and kidney, health alternative. So just to say, like, sometimes these companies do know about, whether that side effects, things like that, and for reasons such as profit and greed, they continue doing what they shouldn't do, and it's actually a moral and an ethical issue. But I am not aware of any vaccine makers that have are aware of side effects and have knowingly continued to distribute vaccine. And the MMR vaccine, the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine that had been supposedly associated with autism, the folks who did that research, they actually came out and they redacted, and they said, we were actually wrong. MMR vaccine is not associated with autism. So the vaccines that we have out now, they've been in millions of people, especially the COVID-19 vaccine, millions of people have gotten them. And we have, very few people who have had, fortunately, it has been rare where there have been serious side effects.
Oh my
And
gosh.
now that
Go
now that
ahead.
the politics of it is not as high as it used to be, people are using religious exemptions to
Right.
not take the vaccine. And I'm still trying to figure out what religion tells you can't take a vaccine, and nobody can explain it to me. And I think that we are individualists in this country. We do think about ourselves. Well, some of us. I got vaccinated because of my grandson. He wanted to play with his friends, and he's only 11. And I was like, you know what? He can't do it. I'll do it for him. But you best believe as soon as he can, because he already said, Gigi, when can I get my shot? I said, as soon as they tell us you can get it.
Yeah.
But making sure that he understands that, and, all of those things. But I look at people and how selfish they are. I go to the grocery store, and people are not wearing a mask, and then they want to come and stand next to you. I give them the look. And they move away from me because I can't afford to get. And even though I have my mask on, I wash my hands, I do all of these things. You don't have a mask on, and you might sneeze. I don't know if it can go in my eyes. I don't know where it can go. But what if I get it? Look at Colin Powell. I know that he had multiple myeloma. He had cancer. He was already sick, but somebody was not vaccinated and went around this poor man, and now he's dead, you know.
Mhm.
And I'm like,
Mhm.
I look at him like, if one of y'all kill me, you know, it won't be nice. And so get away from me. I do. I give people that look.
You
Old,
can
young,
see
I
it
don't care.
through the mask, right?
And I give them the
Yeah.
look, and they move away because this is serious. You
Mhm.
Yeah.
know, we've seen almost 1 million people die.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
we know in our community, we've had people to die from COVID.
Mhm.
And it's serious. It was serious for me from the beginning. From the beginning, I went and bought masks. I had gloves, which I can't wear the gloves because they break my hands out. But I had gloves. I had all kind of sanitizer. I have all kind of disinfectant and sanitizing stuff in the house. I'm probably making us immune to this stuff even working in my house anymore. Because every Saturday I'm cleaning every doorknob. I'm
Yeah.
still in that mode of truly trying to stay safe. You know,
Mhm.
it, this is scary. I have never been. I think with HIV it was scary because they didn't know how you contracted in the beginning, right?
Mhm.
So they
Mhm.
had all of these myths. But as soon as they had a like these are the body fluids. This is how you contract it.
Right.
People
Mhm.
let their guard down because they realize, you know what, if I'm not doing that, I'm good over here. That kind of thing. And it's not the same with COVID. You know, I see people on Twitter comparing Magic playing in the NBA with HIV diagnosis and Kyrie Irving being made to sit down because he won't get vaccinated. And I'm like, wait a minute. I don't think Magic was like having sex on the court with anybody. I don't
Yeah.
think they were sharing needles. I don't think they were doing any of the things we know you have to
Mhm.
do.
Right.
COVID is airborne. Kyrie, you come into the arena, you can infect everybody in that arena.
Mm.
You know, Magic didn't that wasn't gonna happen with Magic.
Right.
So I'm I'm not as bad as I used to be, Dr. Blackstock on Twitter. I have learned to calm down. But I did tell somebody today, you know, how you contract HIV, that's not a good comparison and
Good.
those kind of
Mhm.
things. You
Mhm.
know.
Mhm.
You used to be wilding out on Twitter.
Girl, I don't even want to think that was me. I think I think somebody had hacked me.
Oh goodness. Mhm.
Oh wow. I saw the meme the other day that was comparing those two situations as well. And I just kind of, I don't know, looked up to the sky and then just kept
Yeah.
scrolling. It's so
Yeah.
much
Some. Yeah.
ignorance.
That's the yeah. Protect your energy. Sometimes it's. I mean, depending on if you feel resourced enough, respond. If you don't, just be like.
Sometimes you just gotta pull your sleeves up because you know once you respond, they're coming back, right,
Right.
Gina? Just gotta close your eyes at sometimes. Well, I was seeing Maria's comments coming up. Oh, talking about how like people in other countries don't have access to the vaccinations. And as a public advocate, I ran into that earlier this year where a guy, one of my followers, he's like in the Middle East somewhere. And I felt so privileged. And it made me feel bad too, in a way that I was over here, making this decision not to get the vaccine. And he wanted it so bad, but they hadn't been authorized to receive
Mhm.
them or they didn't have it. And just thinking how our placement in this world can have such an effect on our health and the way that we make decisions and things, like it's not, I don't know, I felt very privileged in that moment. um
Yeah, and we have to realize like we're not safe until everyone is safe, right? Like if sub-Saharan Africa, I think about 2% of the population has been vaccinated. Like
that's
people
it.
can, yes, 2%. 2%. And so, and like, so if there are huge outbreaks there, whatever, we are impacted. But, more than that, like, I mean, we have an ethical responsibility to ensure that everyone has access. And we know that there is the United States is actually throwing out vaccine. It has excess doses. Why? And there are people in
Wow.
parts of the world that are going without. Like this really shouldn't be. And it's manufactured scarcity, right? Because we are hoarding the vaccine while other places are going without.
Wow. I'm not sure if you saw the question from Krista where she's saying, Can you speak a little bit about the booster shot for people living with HIV?
Sure. So the recommendation, so far we have a Pfizer booster that's been authorized, and it'll be likely Moderna and J&J boosters will be authorized very soon. And so just the recommendations for booster are definitely for people 65 plus, and then people who are younger who have underlying conditions that might put them at risk for severe outcomes. Okay. Yeah, I'll get to Maria's question in a quick second. So yeah, I believe people living with HIV would fall under that category. You know, if you have a condition that puts you at high risk for poor COVID outcomes, then to get, I think particularly for people who have low T cell counts or are not on HIV medication, or if they're on but they're not suppressed, would definitely benefit from a booster. And if you obviously have other conditions like diabetes or high blood pressure, things like that. And Maria's comment was around the Moderna. Yeah, so it looks like there's this, it's called mix and match. So what is likely going to be authorized is that no matter what you got first, like let's say I got Pfizer first, that it's okay for me to get Moderna as a booster. And what they're actually seeing is that Moderna actually seems to be a bit more potent in terms of protection than Pfizer and J&J, but those are still also like highly protective against hospitalization and death. But yes, you can, Maria, you can get a Moderna booster instead of a Pfizer booster if you would like, and it looks like the Moderna provides a little bit more protection. But I don't know in the long run whether this makes a difference at a population level or individual level. Like I'm not really sure how that translates. But and then folks who got J&J, they're saying anyone who's 2 months out from a J&J vaccine should get a booster once it's authorized.
Thank you for that, because I didn't even, when picking which one I wanted, it was just like whichever one's going to get me vaccinated the quickest.
Yeah, no, that's fine. That's fine. No, and that's good. Which one did you get, CC?
Johnson and Johnson.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, no.
Yeah, people make me feel so bad about it. I'm like,
no. But did you you got it like 4 weeks ago, you said?
Not even. Maybe
after the baby was born.
Yes.
Yeah, no, it's fine. And it's fine. No, but that's a whole other thing. What they saw is that people who got J&J but then got like a Moderna booster also have. So it's okay. You have the protection now, and you can get. I would probably get like a Moderna or Pfizer booster instead of a J&J booster, just because from the studies it shows that like the level of protection, at least based on antibody levels, is greater. But you do have a good amount of protection now. And the main thing is you have a lot of protection, very high protection against hospitalization and death. And the only issue is that with time, it just looks like it wanes. It sort of the protection decreases. And that's normal for all vaccines. That's why we get flu shot every year, or it's a little different, but that's why we get, several vaccines at a time.
Thank you, Heather. She said she got J&J too. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I felt like so irresponsible when I was making a decision. No. Sort of like how I picked my major in school. I went down the list and was like, I can do that. And Johnson & Johnson, it was like, I know them.
Yeah. No, it's good. It's good. Right. No, it's good that you are highly protected against being hospitalized or dying from COVID.
Well, good.
I did Moderna because Dr. Kizzy, and I was like, well, that's a Black woman.
Right.
I'll take that one. I could have done so much more research. I was like, oh, this is baby lotion. That's how.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. It's like a trusted brand.
It's like, didn't know they made these too, but I'll go with it. Tiomi was asking, is it possible that my T cells were boosted because of the vaccine? I wasn't expecting a number I saw, knowing my relationship with adherence.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I don't know definitively, but I would not be surprised if there was some response, because I don't know how soon after you got your T cells checked, in terms of relationship to when you got your booster or your vaccine. But it does, create an immune, an immune response, like your T cells, get activated as well. So I think it would not be unreasonable to see some temporary change in that measurement.
I thought that it was very, it was great to note that you said, okay, when the question was asked about HIV and the booster shot, but whether or not, like, what our condition is at the time, like whether we're undetectable or how many T cells we have. That was one of the questions I posed to my provider at the beginning, was like, what will COVID do to someone living with HIV? And her response was something along the lines, it doesn't look any different because you are undetectable. My immune system was doing well. I immediately thought that I was at a much greater risk because of my HIV status. And so just knowing taking care of my HIV was protecting me as well.
Totally. No, that's such a great point. Like we say, like, I think, even before we had a vaccine, we're saying, in terms of what people living with HIV can do to protect themselves, we're like, make sure you're on, you're taking your medications as prescribed. Like that's the one, masking, social distancing, all of that, but like taking meds.
Seems like the further out from, in my head, it was like March 2020 when it really like was very big, COVID. Like it finally clicked that this is something going. Seems like the further we get out from that, like it's becoming less and less serious, or people are taking it less and less serious. The amount of people that I have seen, going to parties, and I want to go to a reggae party so bad. Like I want to be in there in the thick of it. I want to be around people, but I just can't bring myself, whether I was vaccinated or pregnant or not, just standing in a group of people in closed doors just seems so irresponsible right now to me. Like people can do whatever they want to, but I just haven't made myself comfortable enough to want to do that. No matter how much I want to dance, whine, and twerk and do all of that, I can't do that right now, or at least I feel like I can't. Hopefully those people that are, enjoying those type of activities will go get vaccinated so that we can continue to, that number needs to be higher than 2%. I didn't know it was so low. It should have jumped at least to 3. Gina and I are vaccinated.
Oh, no, I was just saying 2% of people in sub-Saharan Africa.
Oh, that was Africa.
Sorry.
Okay, I missed that part. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, we had, like, I think here, almost 55%, almost 60%, I think, of eligible folks are vaccinated. I'm so sorry, I spoke quickly. So yes, no, lots of folks are vaccinated. We still need to get more folks vaccinated. Okay. So your message still stands.
Good, we're doing good.
You know what I hear a lot? I hear this a lot from young people. They say, well, I only hang with the same people. We don't go anywhere. We in the hood. We don't. And I say, I thought that about HIV. I thought if I just had sex with people in my hood, I couldn't get HIV because none of us had a car.
Yeah.
What a car had to do with it, I don't know, but that was my reasoning. We didn't have a car, so we didn't go anywhere. Like there are buses. People catch rides with other people. Like, what were you thinking? But people are really thinking that if we stay, we're always together. We do everything together, and we're safe because we're always together. But people venture out, and other people come in, and we don't think about that. Yeah.
I had the same rationale too. It's crazy how it's so similar. It's like, I know this person. That's what I stopped using condoms because I've been there before, and I was all right. So. No, one time I ended up not being, coming back with a negative test. So thank you for addressing it with our young folks, Gina. Our rationale sometimes is a little different, I'll say.
Yes.
But I think we're coming up to the end of our hour. This has been such an amazing conversation. Like I said, I've learned so much. I know that this will be extremely beneficial for those who are watching. In the next 2 weeks, November 3rd, our next episode will be with Bridget. I love her. She's one of our community advisory board members. She's Nurse Lady, and we'll be talking about disclosure to non-HIV providers, which I think can be kind of difficult sometimes. So I hope that you all will join us then, and we'll see you then. And we really hope that you enjoyed this conversation today. So bye, y'all.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
Lots of love. Stay safe, everyone.